Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. Today, we're going to be doing the final Senate prediction before tomorrow. We are officially less than 24 hours away from the first results coming in. It's been a crazy last couple of months. I want to thank you all for watching my videos and subscribing if you have. And if you haven't, I encourage you to do so. Let's end this out strong. Before we get into the final prediction, though, I do want to point out two things. The first is that I will be live streaming the results tomorrow beginning at 6:30 p.m. A couple of friends and I are going to be recording the results as they come in live. Going to be starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. The second thing is to go vote tomorrow. This red wave is only going to happen if we all get out and vote. Polls in a couple of states showed the races neck and neck, and we can win these races. You're going to see here, but it'll only happen if we all get out and vote. So I encourage you to do so. Now let's start filling in the safe states for the Republicans and the Democrats. These are the states that will vote for each respective party by more than 10 points in any scenario. For the Republicans, they include the states of Idaho, Utah. Utah would look like it might be interesting for a while with Evan McMullin, a former Republican who was a never Trump guy, running as an independent, and he's kind of taken some of that more moderate conservative vote, as well as pretty much all the Democratic votes. But even then, the polls still show where the Republican incumbent, Mike Lee, leading pretty handily. We're also going to give the Republicans the states of North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa. Chuck Grassley, the Republican incumbent, he's been there for a very long time. He's well liked. A couple of polls showed this race a little bit more competitive than maybe it normally is, and I don't think Chuck Grassley is going to win by the 20-30 point landslide he usually does, but I still believe it's going to be over 10 points. The state of Missouri, the state of Kansas, both of Oklahoma's elections, they have the normal election along with a special election. The state of Arkansas, the state of Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, the Kentucky, Indiana, and Alaska. The state of Alaska kind of depends on a Republican's going to win there. Just the question is it going to be Lisa Murkowski, who is a more moderate Rhino Republican, or is it going to be Kelly Tshibaka, who is the more Trumpian conservative Republican? It really just depends in that race how many Democrats turn out. Isn't really a Democrat on the ballot, I don't believe, so a lot of the Democrats have concided their support around Lisa Murkowski, as she is the more moderate candidate, and she votes with Biden a decent amount of the time. However, pretty much all the Republicans in the state are supporting Kelly Tshibaka. She's endorsed by the Alaska Republican Party. This is a race that's going to come down to the wire. The only poll we have for this race show it literally as a tie, and I think it's going to be very close. I do give Lisa Murkowski a slight edge, just because she did win the primary election, and the poll is usually underestimated by a tad. And I think Democrats are going to be energized to support Mary Pelota, the Democrat nominee for the U.S. House of Representatives. She's up for re-election again, and Mary Pelota, in the U.S. House, she really energized Democrats. So I would expect Democrats to turn out for her to make sure she stays in office for another 2 years, and they'll probably vote for Murkowski at the same time. So I do give Murkowski a very narrow edge, but anyways, it is still a Republican seat. We're also going to add the state of Florida to this list. Marco Rubio is a very good candidate for the state of Florida. I've usually had this race as borderline safe to likely. I'm officially putting it as safe. Marco Rubio has been absolutely destroying Val Demings in the polls recently. My early voting results for the Republicans across the entire state look very good, but especially in places like Miami-Dade County, where Rubio is already going to do better than he did in the past. Rubio won back in 2016 by, I believe, 8 points, and with Florida taking a huge shift to the right since then, I don't think it's that far out of the question to assume he wins by more than 10. So we have 46 states that no matter what you do, no matter what happens tomorrow, they will remain in Republican hands. We're going to start by doing the same thing for the Democrats, and they have a couple of safe Democrat states. They include Oregon, California, Hawaii, Maryland, Connecticut, New York, Vermont, and Illinois. The state of Connecticut could be under 10. Laura Levy, the Republican nominee, has ran a pretty good campaign. A couple of polls showed the race under 10 points. She's certainly not going to win, but the race might be under 10%. Just have to keep watching. So no matter what happens tomorrow, the Republican Party will have at least 46 Senate seats. The Democratic Party will have at least 44 Senate seats. These remaining states, the states of Washington, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Wisconsin, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire will decide the election. Obviously, some of these states are going to be more competitive than others, and some of them are borderline safe, but they might be under just a little under 10 points. Those states are Colorado and Washington for the Democrats. Let's look at the polls for the state of Washington. This is an interesting state. One that the Democratic Party usually wins very handily. I mean, I believe Biden won Washington by like 20 points. The Republican Party has found a very strong candidate in nurse and veterans affair activist Tiffany Smiley. She's run a very good campaign, made this race very close. The incumbent Democrat Patty Murray only leads about 3 points in the spread so far, with Patty Murray coming very close to leading in a couple of polls. I do believe that Patty Murray pulls out a win here in the end, although I think it's going to be pretty close. I do think it's going to be likely D. Instead of Colorado, this is a race that Republicans honestly probably could have picked up. Incumbent Democrat Michael Bennet really is not all that popular, and Joe O'Dea seemed to have seemed to have a decent chance originally. He seemed to be a pretty good candidate, but he threw it all away by attacking Donald Trump, attacking his supporters. And well, yes, Colorado is a pretty liberal-leaning state. Trump still got like 45% of the vote in Colorado or so. Even if you want to appeal to those 55%, the more moderate Democrats, you still have to hang on to that 45% base. And Joe O'Dea has not done that. He has started feuds with Trump on Twitter and on social media. He has ran as a pretty liberal Republican. And because of that, I really think he's going to lose by more than 5 points. I think Michael Bennett's probably could have. I think Joe O'Dea, the Republican, probably could have won this race, honestly, if he just ran a better campaign. Michael Bennet is not all that popular, but right now I do have to give an edge to the Democrats. We're now going to fill in the states for the Republicans that are likely, and they are Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina. Let's start in the great state of Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson appears to be headed to win relatively handily. Ron Johnson is a candidate that almost always underperforms the polls. Ron Johnson didn't lead in a single poll in 2010. He managed to win. He didn't lead in a single poll in 2016. He managed to win. And now he's leading in basically all the polls by 2, 3, some even have him up by 5, 6 points. I do believe Johnson's going to win by more than 5 points. He leads in the RCP spread by about 3. I think if you adjust that for missed polling errors in Wisconsin, because polling in Wisconsin is horrible, I think Johnson probably wins by about 5 to 6 points. Mandela Barnes was a horrible candidate, really all I can say. Ron Johnson has done a pretty good job appealing to the Trumpian voters in the rural parts of the state, while also keeping that more moderate suburban Republican appeal in the WoW counties near Milwaukee. And I think he's going to absolutely trounce Mandela Barnes. Mandela Barnes was the worst candidate Democrats could put up. Honestly, this guy was horrible. And I think Johnson is going to win re-election pretty handily, probably by at least 5, 6 points. My home state of Ohio, this is a race that I can't lie, I was a little worried about at times, especially over the summer. But in recent polls, J.D. Vance has just absolutely crushed Tim Ryan. I mean, look at this graph. For the longest time, Vance had a lead, but it was only by a couple of points. Tim Ryan seemed to make it very close around early October. Vance only leading by less than a point. But since then, he has just gained and just absolutely obliterated Tim Ryan. Ever since the debates and since the Republicans have actually started to fund Vance, Tim Ryan's campaign has just fallen apart. It's been very obvious to every Ohioan that Tim Ryan is an absolute fraud. And, the thing is, I think Vance struggled early on because people just didn't really know him. I mean, Vance is a political outsider. Not many people really knew him, even when he won the primary. And the things he was known for, because he was attacked so heavily in the primary, a lot of people thought he was like a moderate, never Trump guy. And because of that, Tim Ryan ran a very good campaign, early on at least. And because of that, I do think a lot of J.D. Vance just had to really get his messaging out there and had to really, voters didn't know anything about him. J.D. Vance is a political outsider. Tim Ryan has been in office for more than 20 years. He's ran for president. And now that Vance is really starting to get his message out there, and there's been a few debates, the polls have him absolutely crushing Tim Ryan. And the polls do almost always underestimate Republicans, especially in Ohio. They had Ohio neck and neck in 2016 and 2020. Donald Trump won the state of Ohio by 8 points. Now Vance is leading by 8 points. So, I mean, who knows? We could see a Vance plus 16 victory tomorrow. I don't think it's that likely. I still think it's barely under 10. I think Vance probably wins by about 9. Instead of North Carolina, another state that Democrats thought they had a good opportunity to get a pickup in, but Ted Budd is another great nominee. He is leading in all the polls. He's done a good job at, similar to Ron Johnson, appealing to the rural, more Trumpian voter, while also keeping those suburban, more moderate voters on his side. Sherry Beasley, the Democratic nominee, was probably not the worst candidate the Democrats could have put up, but she certainly is not a very good candidate either. The Democrats' bench in North Carolina is very weak, and Sherry Beasley like I said, she's not the worst candidate the Democrats could have put up, but it's clear she's going to lose very handily. She's down to Ted Budd by 6 points in the polls right now. I think Ted Budd probably wins by about that margin, maybe a little bit more, maybe like a 6, 7 point win for Ted Budd. He's running a great campaign, and he's going to be one of the best senators, in my opinion, other than maybe Vance and a couple other guys we're going to get to here in a second. So now we have the likely states. These are the states that are going to be decided by less than 10 percentage points, but still pretty likely for each party. I would be absolutely stunned if any of these states flipped. So now we have the states of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. These are the states that are really going to decide the election. So you count in all the states that are pretty much guaranteed to go to one side, even if the margin might be a little iffy. The Republican Party is at 49 seats. The Democrats are at 46 seats. Republicans need just one seat to equal the control right now. They need just 2 seats to win control of the Senate. Democrats need 4. They need to win 4 out of the 5 to hold their Senate majority, and they need to gain 1 more. They need to win all 5 to increase their Senate majority. So the Republican Party already in a very good spot. We're going to start in the state of Nevada, which I do believe is going to lean to Adam Laxalt. Adam Laxalt's ran a very good campaign, and a couple of polls here and there do show him down to Catherine Cortez Masto, including this one by USA Today in Suffolk, and another one by Nevada Independent. I would throw out this one from Nevada Independent that has Catherine Cortez Masto leading by 2. This is the pollster that was funded by Catherine Cortez Masto and not Joe Lombardo. Steve Sisolak, the incumbent Democrat. The Democrats funded this poll, so I would throw this one out. They don't say it, but if you look closer, it was funded by them. So really only one poll since like mid-October has had Catherine Cortez Masto leading, and she was only up by 1. Pretty much every single other poll has met Laxalt by 2, 4, 5, 6 points or so. Laxalt leads in the spread by about 2 points. Polls in Nevada do usually overestimate Republicans. That's one of the few states that happens in. Most states, the polls usually overestimate Democrats. Nevada, polls usually overestimate Republicans. Just weird why that happens. I'm not sure why, to be honest, but that's just how it is. However, Adam Laxalt still seems to be maintaining a solid lead. And the other thing I want to talk about is Emerson. They are a pollster that came out with a poll, like I believe last week, 2,000 likely voters, the largest sample size, and they are always spot on in Nevada, and they have Adam Laxalt up by 5. So yeah, sure, Catherine Cortez Masto might be leading in a couple of polls, and polls in Nevada as a whole usually overestimate the GOP. But the gold standard for polling in Nevada, the most accurate pollster in Nevada, which also used the largest sample size, so they have the lowest margin of error, has Adam Laxalt up by 5. You throw that in with past results, including some polls that are actually sponsored by the Democrats that have Laxalt leading. I think Laxalt's in a pretty good spot to win the state by 2 points or so. We're going to go on to the state of Pennsylvania, where I believe Dr. Oz is also going to win by a lean margin. A lean margin is between 5 and 10 percentage points. This is Oz. This is a state that I kind of was going back and forth on. I've been a proud Oz supporter since day one. MAGA Mehmet is going to sweep John Fetterman off his feet and become the next senator for the state of Pennsylvania. Oz has been surging in the polls ever since the debate. That debate really destroyed Fetterman's campaign, honestly. I'm not sure who advised him to do that. But ever since then, all the polls that have a history of being accurate in Pennsylvania, whether it be Trafalgar, Susquehanna, Emerson, have Oz leading by 1, 1, 2, 3. And polls always overestimate Democrats in Pennsylvania anyway. So I think Oz is probably on track to win by about 2 points. Yeah, RCP, Real Clear Politics, the website that I use to look at the most recent polls. If you take into account recent polling misses, then they have Dr. Oz winning by 1.9. I think Oz winning by 2 points is my prediction. I agree with them there. So with that gives the Republican Party 51 seats in the U.S. Senate. The Democrats at just 46. We have 3 states left. They are Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. We're going to start in Arizona, which I do believe is going to tilt to Blake Masters, the Chad himself. Blake Masters is probably one of my favorite candidates we've put up, and this is a race that has been very tight the last couple of weeks. It has been in a dead heat, as you can see, with Masters gaining, especially over the last couple of days. Mark Kelly only leads in the aggregate by 0.5, but Arizona is a state where the polls almost always, I mean literally always, overestimate the Democrats, especially in competitive races. And the other thing I want to note, Mark Kelly is at 48% as an incumbent. Incumbent senators, he's not even close to 50%. He's a 1.5 away. Blake Masters is surging. A lot of the more moderate Republicans who could have possibly voted Libertarian can only vote for Masters now because the Libertarian dropped out and endorsed Masters. And Masters has also led in 2 of the more accurate pollsters. Data for Progress is a Democrat internal. They have Masters leading. Insider Advantage, a local Fox poll, which is usually pretty accurate, has the race as a tie. Emerson, which is a pollster that is spot on in Arizona, has it as a tie, but if you actually looked at the closer percentage margins, they had Masters leading. So if you look at all the polls that tend to be more accurate, and if you look at the results since Mark Victor, the Libertarian nominee, dropped out, and more recently, This race is a dead heat with Masters probably at a narrow advantage. I think Kari Lake doing very well in the governor race will help Lake Masters as well. Kari Lake has campaigned with Lake Masters, and credit to her. She could have just honestly kept running her campaign and, cruised to victory, but she chose to help the Republicans on the rest of the ticket, whether it be Lake Masters, whether it be the candidates for Secretary of State and the state legislature. So credit to Kari Lake for campaigning with these other Republicans who were struggling for a little while. I think Masters, like similar to Vance, just had to get his message out there, but I do believe that Kari Lake helped him out as well. So I think Masters is going to pull off a very narrow win. We're going to finally ground astronaut Mark Kelly. Instead of Georgia, this is a race that I'm also going to put as tilt Republican. I do believe Herschel Walker is going to win this election. It's going to be very close and probably going to go to a runoff, but I do believe Herschel Walker is going to win. Before I say anything more, Georgia has a very weird system where if a candidate does not reach more than 50%, they have a runoff election. They've had that since like the Civil War era. I'm not sure why they have that. A lot of southern states have that rule, but that's just kind of how it is. And Herschel Walker, as you can see here, he took this huge dip early October. He was down by 5 points in the polls. And this was when he had those scandals come out. But really, that only affected him for about a week or so. Ever since then, he has surged and maintained a very narrow lead over Raphael Warnock. Basically, all the polls have him leading by a couple of points. All the polls that have been conducted over the last week, which I do believe is a good sign. If Raphael Warnock and the Democrats had polls showing Walker up, they would have released them. Data for Progress, the Democrat-leaning poll, has Herschel Walker up by 1. A couple more polls have the race as a tie. And polling in Georgia is usually very accurate for whatever reason. So I do believe Herschel Walker, leading in most of the polls recently, including the spread, does put him in a pretty good spot to win. I think it's going to be pretty close because Herschel Walker has honestly not ran the best campaign possible, but I do believe he's going to win very narrowly. And I think it's going to go to a runoff, and from there, I do believe Herschel Walker is going to win again because Democrats have already lost control of the Senate. They're not going to turn out if they're already not going to win. And Herschel Walker is very well liked in Georgia among the Republican base. They are going to turn out for him in the runoff. So Herschel Walker is going to win this race. It's going to be it's going to be by about a 1% or so. The final state is the state of New Hampshire. This is a state that I could easily see going either way. Don Bolduc, the Republican nominee, I originally wrote him off because I thought the primary was too late. I thought he was a little bit too Trumpian to win in New Hampshire, but I was proven wrong. He's led in a couple of the polls that are usually more accurate in New Hampshire. There is a poll from Emerson that has him down by 4. But long story short, all the polls have this race as an absolute dead heat. And really, I would not be surprised if Bolduc manages to pull this off. I think it's going to be very close either way. But I do have to give an edge to Maggie Hassan, the Democrat. I think it's going to tilt blue. I think Maggie Hassan winning by about 0.3 is probably going to be the case, like RCP has. Don Bolduc's ran a good campaign, done the best he can, but New Hampshire is I don't want to say pretty blue state. It's a very weird state politically, and I certainly think it's possible Don Bolduc wins, but I do have to give a slight edge to Maggie Hassan. She's led in most of the polls, and the polls that do have Bolduc up only have him up by like 1. So, like I said, Don Bolduc, it's possible he wins, but I don't think it's the most likely scenario. I have to give the slightest of edges to Maggie Hassan, the Democrat. So with that, thank you for watching this video. This is the final Senate prediction. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.